So today we are so excited for our episode. Delighted to have you here, Christine. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Molly. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah,
Really appreciate it.
why don't you kick off and tell us a little bit? I think you're so articulate with your words, and no surprise as a negotiator. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm from North Central Montana. I started kind of as a pregnant mom or a pregnant teenager living in the back of my 1972 Chrysler Newport. I had 3 kids by the time I was 22 and was married to a not so nice guy living on welfare, was on and off welfare for over 8 years and decided I wanted a different life. And so I negotiated one with myself. And I ultimately earned my MBA from Harvard University. My 3 daughters walked across stage in front of me to get little teddy bears that had HBS, which is what we call Harvard Business School, on them, and right before I got my degree. And that launched me into a career of working with a number of the Fortune 500. I've negotiated with almost half of the Fortune 500 in 53 countries. But because I'm from a tiny, tiny town in North Central Montana, my parents are small business owners. And I got frustrated seeing how larger organizations treated smaller companies. And I wanted to help small businesses and level the playing field when they're in their negotiations. Because in a big company, everybody is a specialist. But in a smaller organization, people are generalists. And it's not until you hit kind of a tipping point size where you start bringing more specialists on. And negotiation has a very weird pocket for people. People either pigeonhole it into this academic discussion, something that's only for attorneys, or something that is purely sales. And it's all of those and none of those at the same time. And so I really work with companies to teach them how to ask for more of what they want, and then I show them how to negotiate for it.
And I love your sign behind you too.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Thank
So,
you.
how long have you owned the company?
So we incorporated a couple of years ago. We really started building this year though, so right before COVID, of course. So it'll be a great story in a short while. But I've been doing negotiation now for almost 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, bravo on your backstory. Oh,
Thank
that
you.
is inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. So I have to ask you. So we met on a radio show, where we were both invited to be guests on that, I guess, a couple weeks ago or so.
Mhm.
And I was just so fascinated by your business model, and you were speaking about sales and negotiations and contracts and renegotiations. And Angel, the host, had said, one day you're going to have to tell us about your story about negotiating a car. So
Yep.
I've been dying since then. You got to tell us.
Yes. So I bought 2 cars for the price of one plus $5,000. So,
What?
yep. Yep. So this was a few years ago, but before I dive into the story a little bit, I will tell you that beginning of this year, so beginning of 2020, I was in an Uber and my driver he's also a car salesman. And I told him this story. So this is January of 2020. And I told him this story and his response was, oh yeah, I can see how that can happen. So what happened was my husband needed a car because he says that I wrecked it. I say he wrecked it. One of us wrecked the car. It doesn't matter now. And I didn't really like my car, but I didn't need a new one. But he needed a new car. So he had an infatuation with the Honda Element. And I don't know if you're familiar with that car. Personally, I think it's hideous. So if any of your listeners are avid Honda Element fans, my husband shares your passion. I do not, which was point one in how I was able to go and make this request because I was indifferent to the outcome of the negotiation. So I just kind of randomly was like, I wonder if we could get 2 for the price of one. And so I did a bunch of research. We drive manual transmissions. We were living in Boston area at the time. And the Honda Element is a 4-seater car. And I looked up what their target market was, and it was people under the age of 30. And it is a perfect car for a 21-year-old going out on their first night of drinking, because you can literally hose it out. You can take a garden hose and wash the thing out. And so it's perfect for, that age group and people who are super active in camping. And a lot of people in Denver, I would imagine, would have this
Yes.
car, right? Because you're out doing the outdoors and you
And
can.
they are hideous.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not a fan.
Me
But we
neither.
had some features that we wanted and all this. And so, but I also researched the business model for a dealership. How does a dealership make money? What happens when they're holding inventory for an extended period of time? How do their people get compensated? What's their sales process look like? How will they treat me differently than they would treat my husband? And so once I researched all that, I also researched like how many people in New England drive manual transmissions, and it's something like 7%. And the percentage of people who drive manual transmissions who are 30 and under is far smaller than 7%. It's the best anti-theft device on the planet right now in any urban area is a manual transmission. So I gave my husband a role. I said, I'm going to play the stereotypical how the salesperson expects me as a woman to behave. I'm not going to drive the car and I'm not going to talk to the salesperson. And so once we get to price though, then you're going to exit the conversation and I'm going to enter the conversation. So my husband played his role perfectly. We get to the dealer and I mean, you can see me, right? I look like somebody who would read Good Housekeeping or Red Book magazine, right? No. But I was sitting there and we were kind of like at this bar setup. My husband was to my left and I'm flipping through one of those two magazines. And he says to the salesperson, well, how much? And the salesperson says, well, he gave him list price. And my husband said, well, what if we bought two? And so then he quoted him list price times two. And it was at that point I shut my magazine and I turned square onto the salesperson. And I said, I think you can do a lot better than that. And in a car dealership, they have to take every offer to the manager. The salesperson cannot approve of a deal. So whatever offer you give to them, they have to take back to their manager. So I was like, this is the offer. We'll take two of them for the price of one and we'll pay for one of them. We're going to give you the same amount of money as if we were buying one, but we want to drive off the lot tonight with two of them. And I said, and I know you have to take that to your manager. I said, go smoke a cigarette, yell, mad, get mad, laugh your head off at me, whatever you're going to do, go get that out of your system and just come back. So the manager obviously comes with him and the manager's kind of not very happy with me. But I have all this research. I know what they need to do to make money. I know that they have 4 of these cars sitting on their lot, and it was the smallest lot of a Honda dealer in the region. So they had 4 of these manual transmission cars taking up inventory. And so the guy's upset, he's frustrated, and it's Friday night. So he's getting really agitated. And I look at my watch and I look at my husband. I said, we have reservations. It's date night and we need to get going. And if you leave a dealership, nine times out of 10, more than 90% of the time, you will never go back to that dealer to buy that car. So it's really important for the salespeople to keep you at that dealership. So I looked at the manager, and I said, so you're working Friday night, so I assume you're not working tomorrow. What are you doing tomorrow? What are you doing this weekend? So completely changed the nature of the conversation to take him off, kind of put him off balance so that he could calm down. And he was taken aback. And then he's like, well, I do dog sled racing. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I said, I'm from Montana. And the Iditarod winner 2 years in a row was from Lincoln, Montana. And my parents used to fly their airplane there and da-da-da-da-da-da. And we had a standard poodle. And there was huge controversy about standard poodles racing in the Iditarod. And so we started that conversation. So we completely changed the nature of the conversation and got to connect on a personal level. And so then I brought it back and I said, okay, I said, so what are we going to do about these cars? I said, this is what I believe to be the facts in your business. I believe this about your market. I believe this about your profitability. I believe this about your inventory control. I just went down my spreadsheet that was in my head of all the numbers I'd done. And he looked at me and he said, "You're off on inventory holding." And I said, "Okay, what should it be?" And so he gave me a number. And so we settled for 2 cars for the price of one plus $5,000. And we drove off that day with 2 cars.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
This is a process that you follow for,
absolutely.
obviously it worked like a charm.
Yep. And it works every time.
So,
And no matter what I'm negotiating, whether it's commercial real estate, whether it's software, hardware, manufacturing, customer contracts of all types and shapes and forms, sizes, it doesn't matter. That process works. And it makes a difference when you can take, because at the end of the day, negotiation is inherently emotional. And people who think that it's not are completely missing the human factor of it. And what I said at the beginning was what allowed me the freedom to be able to make what appeared to be a ludicrous request. I mean, not many people would think to even ask for 2 cars for the price of one. It's just not very common. And you probably couldn't reach that agreement on every model, right? We had very specific things and it was a specific model and with a specific market, but you can apply that methodology to anything and get a better deal. But I was indifferent to the outcome, right? So it was, my husband wanted the car. I wanted to do something from him. And I thought it would be kind of fun to see if I could do it. Yeah. So, but
I'm surprised they didn't offer you a job at the end of that.
I actually have gone and taught salespeople in car dealerships how to sell though. Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, I bet. So I love this process, and you and I have talked about this multiple times in regards to, as you know, our listeners, our audience, and my ideal client, avatar client that I work with, law firms. And in the legal space, you would think, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Contracts, right? You would think agreements, contracts, and that they would be superstar rock stars at that. And not the case. In the 25 years I've been working with attorneys, I will get on phone calls, coaching, consulting, just real quick, hey, you got a minute, call, and hearing about their practice. And they start telling me, I'm like, all right, what's the makeup of your practice? Tell me what you do for marketing, in regards to software, your CRM, start going through. And then when I do a deep dive in the P&L and the budgets, and I see how much they're paying for printers, how much they're paying for SEO or paying for website services, and sometimes paying 3 different companies that are all doing the same thing. And it's heart-wrenching when I hear and I look at these contracts that they sign, and it really without any understanding, number one, of what they're saying. And number two, I'm like, walk me through this conversation of when you signed this thing and how often they're sold, this voodoo, especially in the technology and the marketing space. Use all these buzzwords so they confuse you and overwhelm you. So you're like, oh my God, I don't know what this means. It sounds overwhelming. They must be the expert. Here's my credit card and let me sign this contract where I'm completely powerless. And I just am so amazed. So I would love for you, in regards to, give our listeners some nuggets in regards to how to take back their power and give them something to anchor their teeth into in regards to negotiating contracts before they sign anything.
Yeah, so I think that ironically, the thing that is leading to that kind of outcome for many of your clients is one of the big things that I'm sure that they tell their clients to do in the first place, which is have clarity around what you want, why you want it, and how important it is to you. Because especially when it comes to software, right, you get all these bells and whistles and people like talk about software companies build out roadmaps that are 3 to 5 years in length, and they get super excited about the new features that are coming out, and it's doing all this whiz bang things. But just because that's happening doesn't mean that you need that, right? And what a lot of people do is they just don't spend enough time, like we did with the car, right? We knew exactly what model we wanted. We knew all the features. We knew the features. We prioritized the features. If we can't get this, which ones are the most important, so we know the trade-offs. And when it comes to technology or services, right, like if you're talking marketing services, website design, SEO kind of things, all of those things, you have to be really clear about what it is that you want. Because once you have that clarity, now you have a different language that you can listen to and talk to when you're talking to your counterparts. And you have more sensibility around, okay, well, that's nice. That's a nice feature to have, but I don't care about that feature. That's not what I'm paying for. Are these 5 things that are what the things that are the most important to me? Are you able to do that? Will the software work the way that I need it to work in my organization? And and making sure that you have clarity, like in software especially, what happens if the software goes down? How are you getting compensated for that? What kind of support and maintenance are you having, and is it worth it, right? I know companies, because I've done a lot of technology, and I spent a lot of time in the tech space working with companies negotiating software contracts, and it, like, support and maintenance, I mean, if it's not a super critical, high critical software and you're paying for platinum level support, check to see how long it's been since you actually called support. Because if it's been 5 years since you've called support, you probably don't need platinum level service. But they're going to try to sell it to you at 23 to 28% of the software price, right? Because that's the way that works. And so, but if you're not clear on what you want, why you want it, and how important it is, then it's easy for you to kind of get led around by the bull ring. I did grow up on a ranch, so but the thing is that clarity is critically important. And there's a client that I worked with a number of years ago who had a software. This was a larger company, but the principle is still the same. So it was a larger company. It was an oil and gas company. And they had a software that they had 600 concurrent licenses for. They paid $10,000 per license per year for that software. So it's astronomically expensive. So when I met with the engineers, and first question I was asked, who uses this software? So I got this long list of different departments and whatnot. How do each of these departments use this software? People were using it differently. How often do they use this software? Vast difference in terms of how they were using it and the frequency within which they were using it. What happened was that they had these 600 licenses that they were paying for every year, and only 280 concurrent licenses were used on a regular basis. So they were paying more than 2 times what they needed. They had more than 2 times the number of licenses that they needed. Now, there was 1 week a year when they spiked. It was in August, and they spiked and they kissed up right against that 600 concurrent licenses. It was less expensive by a lot for them to pay the penalty for going over on their usage of that software than it was to be paying for 600 licenses a year. So so when I say about what you're using, what do you want, why do you want it, and how important is it? It's those kind of things. No different than the car. What were the priorities? What did I want? Why did I want it? And how important was it? And when you have that kind of clarity, then when the vendor, the supplier, starts selling you on all their bells and whistles and their features and benefits, now you know exactly what it's being used for, how it's being used, and who's using it. And so what we wanted was we wanted to renegotiate that deal so that we could have a standard usage and with a little bit of an uplift. And they said, well, we don't do that. Well, then I went back and I found in previous communications that they actually had sent a draft contract with that language and that definition in it.
Oh,
And I was like, so they don't want to use it, but they do it. So that's what we ended up getting. We saved them millions of dollars over the life of that contract because of that. Just
wow.
that one thing, that knowing what you want, why you want it, and how important it is, most critical aspect of understanding, because it's about what we negotiate between our ears that drives the success, in my opinion, and my experience of our negotiation.
I love the starting with the clarity, what the things that you want. And I think being unwavering in those so often, especially around marketing, right? And I'll have attorneys come to me and technology and say, okay, well, here's a 12-year plan. Here's phase one, here's phase two, here's phase 75. I'm like, let's just focus on phase one, even if you have to pay more for phase two than if you would have bundled it in the beginning. When you're ready to deploy it, I think that it's worth it, because to your point, they get all the bells, the whistles, and, just all these wonderful things it's going to do. And you and I both know people don't even use 10% of technology. I think getting that clarity and then being really steadfast and stern in it when you're walking into the meeting, and keep pushing back and claiming, your own power in that is number one. And when you were speaking, I'm like, I think too of like you did, the first thing you did, doing an analysis of seeing who's using this software for what percentage of the time. So often when people come to me, I'm like, this is great that you bought all this, especially with software or
Mm-hmm.
marketing, but okay, entrepreneur, business owner, you just signed this and you signed up for this, but who's implementing this? And it's crickets on the phone. Like, who's going to be implementing this? Who was that question never even asked? So having that clarity around what you want, what you needed to do, and keep it super stupid and simple. Like, I need a calendar. I need the accounting software. I need to be able to email from it. So often I'll look at these contracts and people come to me. I'm like, and I'm marketing. I have a marketing agency, and they'll come to me. I have a consulting agency, hiring agency, and they'll come to me and they're like, there's no email capability of it. You can't even email from this thing. And so then they have to buy another software to do, and they're like, well, we didn't know the question. We didn't realize it. We just assumed.
Well, one of the other things, so I'm like coming back, and so I'm thinking like CRMs as an example, right? So you got some big names in the CRM space, Salesforce,
Yeah.
NetSuite, and you got a bunch of others. And so I'm assuming that your listener base crosses the gamut in terms of size of firm that they're with.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a philosophy that I never, when I always tell my clients, don't do business with somebody who's more than 2x where you are, because you lose your leverage. So I have two clients right now who are retail clients, and we're renegotiating their commercial lease with their landlord. They each are about 1.5 million in revenue a year. Let's call it 20%, 25% gross or profit margin. Their landlord is a $12 billion market cap company. So when it comes to these women who own this business, right, and they're struggling and their doors have been shut because of the pandemic, and you've got a $12 billion market cap company that's cash rich, flush in cash, can ride this out for a long time, what do you think their leverage is? It's pretty nominal. And so positioning to be able to get a really good deal for them was challenging. We were successful in doing it, but it was still super challenging to do it. And the thing is that that's true. So like if you've got smaller agencies or smaller firms that are they're like, oh, I need to do Infusionsoft, or I need for CRM stuff, or I need to do NetSuite or Salesforce. I'm like, time out.
Yeah.
Time out. There are really amazing tools in the market that are smaller, that are going to be much more responsive to a smaller firm than these big guys who you just don't matter at the end of the day to them. And so in terms of kind of, as you're thinking about your negotiation strategy, think about who's best able to meet that strategy, not just for today, but who's going to grow with you and who's going to be invested in your success as well. Because that makes it easier when you have to renegotiate, because at some point, if you believe in a customer for a lifetime, then you have to renegotiate at some point. That is just a given. It's like being married. I've been married to my husband, who's amazing, for 27 years, but I'll tell you, if we had the same deal that we entered into when we got married 27 years later, we wouldn't still be married. Right? Because our situation's changed. Our relationship has changed. We don't have kids in the house anymore. And just all these things have changed. Yet when we get into business relationships, we often expect them to stay the same because we have a contract. And I'm like, and the lawyers on listening may have a different view of this, but I'm like, so what? We have a contract. We can renegotiate the contract. You can do something different to make it work for both of us.
I love that. Is so fascinating. And that is my win from today's episode. I love that. So often, it's funny you say Infusionsoft. When I go through P&Ls and I start doing analytics on what they're using, I'm like, oh my gosh, another firm with Confusionsoft. That's what we call it.
Yes.
They think it's like that. You don't need it. You're a firm of two. You don't need that type of software. And I love what you said, like meet people where they're at. And likewise, we always get seduced by the bigger, better, what have you, and believing that there's additional support there, right? That's constantly available, but that's not the case at all. So I love that. Number one. Number two, renegotiating. Guys, our listeners, you have to hear that in stereo. So often they'll just keep it on auto renew. Do not have your contracts on auto renew for anything you want to have. And if you're one of my clients, you know this. We do an end of the year analysis. We look at the key performance indicators. We look at the return on investment for everything you have in your practice, whether it's a marketing company, it's a technology company, whether it's employees, what have you. So really understanding that part of the, entering into a relationship, and I love that marriage analogy, is that there's always going to be a renegotiation in the process and doing an analysis. Your needs that you had a year ago, if you have the exact same needs at the end of the year, you're probably not on a path of growth. You're probably not on a path of evolution. And you have to remember that when you go into these various contracts, the needs that you have today, especially if you are buying something from a place of pain, or you're buying something because you have to fix something. And I love what you said, when your emotions are high, you're emotionally triggered by it, you have to get really clear and grounded in regards to why you're even spending your time or why you're looking for this magic bullet or solution, and making certain that you're not making a knee-jerk reaction. Sometimes you might make a knee-jerk reaction where it's like, okay, we have to get a phone system, and you might not have the ability to do the best research and get 5 different proposals from 5 different companies or what have you, which I would recommend you use someone like Christine and not do that on your own. It's worth the investment, but you have to know where you are today. Just have it in your mind. It's hopefully not where you're going to be, and it's hopefully not the needs you're going to have 6 months from now.
And to your point, I love that you said that, because I kind of latched onto this a couple of weeks ago, and my attorney friends are laughing at me when I say it. But the thing is that when we enter into contracts, right, we enter into a contract based on information we have today, but with the hope of what our relationship is going to look like in the future, right? And hope is not a guarantee, and things change, right? Can you imagine being the person, because I'm 100% certain these people exist, the person who opened a restaurant the day that Los Angeles shut down? Can you imagine opening a retail store the day your state shut down? I mean, or any business, or that you bought a commercial building and now 3/4 of your tenants are not paying full rent. I mean, those situations happen. And so the deals that we entered into 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago are not necessarily the deal that we can live with now. And this subject of renegotiation is huge. If you really do believe in a customer for a lifetime, then you have to be prepared to renegotiate. And it's in everyone's best interest to do that.
Yeah, I love that. So really have clarity, be really clear on your time frame and maybe chunk it out 6 months, a year, but don't go much more after that. Have it in your calendar, somewhere in your planning that you are going to, when your contracts are about to expire, and having that power of the pause and going back and really looking at them. And, I know you have so many amazing downloadable tools that we've talked about in the radio show. What would you say would be great for our listeners to start with in regards to some of your downloadable tools that you have to really amplify and be able to take today's episode and your amazing wisdom and be able to apply it, because attorneys are signing contracts for outside vendors, outsourced services. I'm so amazed at how many of them don't even have contracts.
Well, I mean,
Wow.
law firms, no matter what their size, you're still small business owner. You're still a small business owner, right? I
Yes.
mean, you're a lawyer, but you're a business owner, and
Yes.
so that's an important thing. I mean, right now, the subject of renegotiation is just huge in the market right now, and so I actually have I just launched a masterclass that your listeners can join for free. They can attend it for free.
Oh, wow.
If you just text Venn Zone to 26786. I'll type that in the chat. Then they can take the masterclass for free. And then they'll also get my 7 elements of successful negotiation. And something that might be really fun for your listeners is they'll also be able to take a quiz to learn what their default negotiation style is. Because what we didn't talk about is not only is it important to know what to ask for, but how you ask for something matters. And so we talk about that. And in business school, I mean, I went to Harvard. I was honored to be taught by, people from the program in negotiation and learn from those amazing people. But we don't teach people how to move from one negotiation style to another. So we typically just fall back on our default style, and that's what we do, and that's all we do. And it's costing us business and costing us success in our negotiations. So you'll be able to figure out what your negotiation style is and stuff too. So
Well,
I'll type that in the chat.
yeah, put that in the chat. We'll put it in the show notes for those of you that are listening to the audio version. Those on YouTube, you can go ahead and pick out in the chat, but we'll have it in our show notes. Christine, I don't know if you know this about attorneys, but in law school, they teach you to be an amazing lawyer. They do not teach you anything about being a business owner at all.
Yeah. Yep.
And
And
so hearing this from you and this amazing gift and masterclass that you're going to give to, listeners, I cannot encourage you enough to take part in this and to support you as we're sitting here, end of September. The perfect example is office space and leases and things. That renegotiation is huge right now, especially if your business has been impacted, and you can use this time to really educate yourself and go to, negotiation boot camp, if you will, and hone those skills so they can support you through the rest of your entrepreneurial journey.
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the thing is that most of the attorneys I know, I'm launching a podcast, and I actually want to talk to somebody who's really good at the business side of their firm, because there's some great negotiation stories about the things that we've been talking about that would be beneficial for other attorneys to hear and to learn from. And having that business aspect, I think, will benefit attorneys across the board in dealing with their own clients, right? I mean, I talk about, with my attorney friends, we talk a lot about how, contract and business relationship risk is more business risk than legal risk.
Mm.
And so, but what happens is that a lot of people will pass off a contract to their attorneys. And as attorneys, you're not trained to understand the business unless you have a joint JD MBA, right? But most attorneys don't have that experience and that knowledge. And so you're at a disadvantage. So where my firm comes in is we provide that business aspect to marry with the legal aspect and work with our attorneys and our clients' attorneys to get better deals for them, because we're focusing on two different things, but it comes together really well.
And it really takes the emotional charge out of it when you're anchoring to a system and a process. And like you said, it's about your conversation and how you approach it, how you come into it, and kind of holding your head high and really just being really certain. And like you were in buying two cars. Love that. Love that.
Yeah. You have to believe in what you're asking for.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness.
You have to believe you're worth it. Otherwise you won't get it.
Oh gosh. So for our listeners, here's your homework. You could pick option 1 or option 2, go out and negotiate buying 2 vehicles this week, or you can go ahead and renegotiate your commercial office space lease. Let us know how you do.
I would love to hear that. I would love to.
Okay, so for our listeners, in closing, so we thank you, Christine, for being our guest today. I know this is just the beginning. You and I are going to come back and talk about renegotiation. You're like, that is a hot ticket right now. And we'll come back and really have that conversation again, because I know many of our attorneys and business owners are in that very seat right now.
Very good. That would be great. This has been awesome. I've loved being here. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us quickly in closing, how can our listeners connect with you again and take advantage of your masterclass?
So if they text VENZONE, VENNZONE, to 26786, they can take the masterclass to get the 7 essential elements of successful negotiation and learn their default negotiation style. And I'll also include the opportunity to have a consultation session with me. So I'll include that scheduling link when you put it in the show notes.
Oh, great. Okay, good. I'll put that'll be in the bottom for our listeners in the show notes as well. So please take advantage of amazing opportunity to meet with Christine McKay of Venn Negotiation. And again, I'll have all the goodies in the bottom of the show notes. Thank you for being our guest today. Can't wait to have you back.
Thank you very much, Molly. Good to see you.
You too. Until next time.